Hello and good afternoon and welcome back everybody. It has been 2 weeks since I have last been here doing my Friday afternoon webinar I thank you all for coming back to listen to me where I sort of share my knowledge and hopefully we'll be able to help some of you as we work our way through this whole new different environment that we're finding ourselves in. I can see the attendees still trying to log in, so I'll give them a few minutes while they all try and get in. We've had a fantastic response to our webinars we've had numbers that I never ever dreamed that we would ever have. So as I say, thank you very much for joining me. So today's webinar, I'm going to be covering a business restructure, whether it's a redundancy or whether it's going to be a dismissal for some other substantial reason, because it's quite important that if you are going to be going through any of these, that you make sure that you get it right, because the last thing you want to do is go through all the hard work and then find out that you've actually got it wrong, and then you find yourself with somebody who's perhaps not quite as happy about the changes as that what you were hoping to have. So I'm going to talk about a business restructure, redundancy or dismissal for some other substantial reason. So for you, just a reminder, today it's Friday the 14th of August. My gosh, where is the year going? It seemed like only 5 minutes ago we were in June webinars and here we are in August, but it's Friday afternoon, it's 3 o'clock, and I'm going to be with you for the next hour or so while I talk about the business restructure and hopefully get to those all important questions and answers at the end of it. So my name's Angela Clay. I'm an HR solicitor, not an HR solicitor, I'm an employment law solicitor, and I'm the Managing Director of HR for UK, and I'm responsible for HR for UK's role as a leading professional HR service provider for businesses throughout the UK. So who is HR for UK? Who are we? We are a leading provider which provides HR support, employment support, payroll, pensions, and health and safety services to all organisations in the UK. We've got over 30 years worth of experience, and we've got some fantastic 5-star reviews on our website, and I'd really encourage you all to go and have a look at it. I promise you I will get back on the bike and get my teeth back in. It has been 2 weeks since I've been on the webinar, so I do need to get back on that bike and get back into my stride. So please do bear with me. I promise you will come away with this out of here with some real nuggets of information. So just a quick reminder, you can go to our website, which is www.hrforuk.com. You can drop us an email at info@hrforuk.com, or you can give us a call on 01455 444 222. But do go and have a look and see what other people are saying about our services. And I'm very proud of some of the feedback that we have, particularly in more recent times. We've helped so many businesses help find their way through the furlough, help find their way through going through redundancies, restructures, we've really, hand on heart, been able to make a difference to those businesses. So my vision has and always will be is to make sure that your business comes out of this crisis successfully by me offering you with clear, professional, practical advice and support throughout the process. So what are we going to cover today? So my Friday webinars would not be a Friday webinar with an update on furlough. So I'm going to touch on a couple of things, and we've got that one all-important hot topic, and it's not the weather, it is about holidays and countries that go into quarantine, and what does that mean for you as an employer. So I'm going to touch on that, but then I'm going to have a look at what you need to take into account when you are considering a business restructure. I'm going to give you some 10 top tips on how to do it. I'm also going to talk to you about the difference between a restructure and a redundancy, because the one does not necessarily follow the other, and it's quite a clear distinction, and I'm going to help you to make that distinction if you are going to be going through one or the other process, and whether the outcome for an employee who is going to be leaving the organisation, whether it is going to be leaving as a result of a redundancy or whether it's going to be the result of some other substantial reason. Because of course we do need to remember that any dismissal has to be for one of the potentially fair reasons as set out in the Employment Rights Act. And those are the only two that are available for you if you are doing a restructure or a redundancy. So please, just a reminder for everybody, hopefully you getting back on the bike just as much as what I am. We do have the questions on the right-hand side of your panel. Please do drop in those questions. They don't have to be about today's webinar. It can be about any HR issue that you may be having an issue with, and you just want to have a quick question, and I'll be more than happy to help you. But more importantly, we would love to hear what you would like to have as future webinars, where we can help you, guide your way through the myriad of issues that you have in terms of HR. And we are here to help you. HR for UK are well known for the handheld support and guidance that we provide our clients. So do ask those questions. As I said, you don't have to put them in the question box. I'd love for them to be in the question box because they're live and they're real, and I'll get to them at the end of the webinar. But if you want to have a little bit more of a personal conversation, or a little bit more of a complex question that's perhaps going to take up a bit too much space in the box, do drop us an email. You can get in contact with us, as I say, through our website www.hr4uk, or you can drop us an email, info@hr4uk, or as I say, give us a call and we'll be happy to help you. And that telephone number is 01455 444 222. We'll be more than happy to help you. So I look forward to answering your questions and helping your business through this time and beyond. And now I'm going to have a look at what we're going to be talking about today. So you don't need me to tell you, everybody knows that many businesses at the moment are busy going through that transition stage from lockdown, partial lockdown, complete lockdown, being locked down, coming out of lockdown, being locked down again. But we're all grappling with the transition stage, and we are all looking at the effects that COVID-19 has had on our individual businesses. As I say, some businesses have remained open during lockdown, but they have to perhaps do things differently so that they can comply with social distancing rules and regulations to make sure that we can put those measures in place to prevent the transmission of COVID-19, the coronavirus. So even if we have stayed open, the way you were doing business back in January, February of this year is definitely not the way you are doing business now, because you've had to implement different measures. There are other businesses who have had to close down completely, and there are some businesses that are, only coming out of the restrictions now as the overall restrictions in the country are being eased. And some businesses, we had a stop-start scenario a couple of weeks ago where, you could do something and literally on the turn of a dime, you couldn't. So many organisations, and it's been really well publicised, I don't think anybody's hiding it, is that they've already started the redundancy consultation process. But some organisations are probably waiting it out to see what the impact is going to be and how it is going to affect their businesses in the long term. When we first started with the coronavirus and the impact that it was having on organisations, it was very much a situation of it's going to be a deep cut, but we are going to recover very quickly. I think now the economists are looking at it, and I think they've perhaps had a little bit of a change of heart on how quickly we are going to recover from this, and rather from a sharp down and big bounce up, I think it's going to be more of a progressive return back to the type of numbers that we were looking at before. But businesses will have changed regardless of what you are doing, whether it is in a positive way or in a negative way. Businesses are different. They are very different in the way that we deliver our services, our products, than what we did before. So some of them will be looking at maybe perhaps it's not quite a redundancy situation, but we do need to do things differently, which is going to result in a business restructure. So what you're going to learn when we're going to get out of this is, I'm going to send you away with some 10 top tips on how to do that restructure. But before we go on to that, let's just have a look at an update on furlough. So we're well into August. We're well into the flexible furlough scheme. It's been up and running for about 6 weeks now, because if you will remember, the flexi furlough came into play at the beginning of July. Hopefully everybody made their claims that they were supposed to make at the end of July, making sure that they got that all-important grant back in relation to previous periods of furlough. But of course, August, we see that first step change. The scheme will still pay 80% of wages for those furloughed hours. Of course, anybody who is working, they would get paid their normal hours for those worked hours. But employers will have to pay the national insurance contributions and the employer auto-enrolment contributions at the end of this month. There is still that cap of £2,500 per month per employee that can be claimed under the scheme. So, you know, we are starting to see the furlough scheme wind down, and hopefully many of you are far more familiar with it now that we are starting to get into that routine and starting to get things back to normal. So I've had a lot of questions in the last week or so about the Kickstart scheme and the traineeship scheme, which were schemes that were introduced at the beginning, you know, during the lockdown. I think that it was introduced in July. We were promised some further guidance and information on it by the end of July. We are now on the 14th of August, and I have to say that we haven't received any further information on either the Kickstart scheme or the traineeship scheme. We promised that as soon as we get some more information about it, we will get it out. We do know, however, that these roles will only be available from the autumn. So I suspect that the government is trying to deal with the current matters of perhaps schools, children who are dealing with, you know, getting schools back open in September, or, you know, we're looking at the A-level results, GCSE level results, which are about to come out. So all of those things are probably taking the government away from where they should be focusing. I'm not talking on behalf of the government, that's my own personal opinion, but I am anticipating that we will get those all-important guidance notes on how we are going to be dealing with the Kickstart scheme and how we're going to be dealing with that trainee scheme. But you can be rest assured, you will be the first to know. As soon as I know it and get the government guidance, I will be sure to share it with you. So let's have a look at the hot topic. We cannot ignore this, holidays and COVID-19. You know, first of all, we were all in lockdown. I strongly recommended and advised you to make sure that staff used up their holiday while they were on furlough, so that you didn't have this cumulative effect of having accrued but not yet taken holiday, or being taken last period of the time. You know, we're in school holidays now at the moment. Many people perhaps had previously booked holidays that have still been going ahead, and some people have taken a chance and thought, well, actually, I think it's safe now to be able to go on holiday, and have booked those holidays abroad. And which is great, but as we've seen, you get on very, very short notice, you know, that people who think they are going abroad on a holiday, going to a safe country even, going to a country that's on the safe list. We've got those safe travel corridors, so they have booked a holiday in good faith, and off they are going to go. And then overnight, it changes. The rules change. They're either on the aeroplane, they're about to get on the aeroplane, they're already there, where they are finding themselves that they have to self-isolate for 14 days upon their return to the UK. But where does that leave employers? You know, this is changes that have been made overnight. And what I want to help you do is to have a think about what policy you are going to have in place that you can share with your employees. So if anybody does go on holiday and they do find themselves in the situation where they are going to have to self-isolate when they come back, they know exactly what is going to happen as far as their work is concerned. So the big question is, do employers pay full pay or do they pay SSP under the coronavirus statutory sick pay scheme? Because of course, this isn't either of them. So how does it work? So of course, if an employee is coming back from a country that has been put onto the red list and have to self-isolate when they come back, if the employee can work from home, that's absolutely fantastic. They can continue to work from home and they should be paid as normal. However, if they can't work from home, it is a question as to what type of leave are they going to be taking. Is it going to be a statutory entitlement or is it going to be a discretionary entitlement? And what pay entitlements are going to be attached to those? So let's have a look if someone can't work from home, because of course it's quite straightforward. If somebody can work from home, they're just going to work from home. They're obviously not going to go out shopping, but they will at least be able to continue carrying on working for you, and they would, as I say, would get their normal pay. But if they can't work from home, so there's basically two options to them, is that they need to take extra annual leave or take it as unpaid. It is not statutory sick pay either under the government scheme or under any company policy scheme. And I'd be very surprised if a company was going to be paying sick pay, full sick pay, company sick pay for somebody who is being quarantined. The guidance on that is very clear, that workers and employees are not entitled to statutory sick pay if they are self-isolating after returning to the UK and cannot work from home. So it's very clear. It's not statutory sick pay, so it has to be something else. And that something else is either more holiday or unpaid leave. And I think the key message that you need to get out is to make sure that your employees understand what the consequences will be if they are going to be going abroad and coming back from holiday and having to go into that self-isolation quarantine period upon their return. Of course, if an employee then develops symptoms of COVID-19, and subject to eligibility, they may be entitled to the statutory sick pay under the government scheme. Now, if you've claimed for them before, you won't be able to claim for them again. But it would be surprising if they have had the symptoms before and they now have it. So, they may be entitled to statutory sick pay if they are isolating because they have symptoms of the virus, or they are living with someone who has symptoms, or if they have been instructed to self-isolate through the test and trace system, or if they have to self-quarantine because of shielding, or they've been advised to do so. But if it is just because of the quarantine, they are not entitled to that statutory sick pay. So they don't fall into that category. Now, HMRC, well, they haven't actually come out and said anything, but unofficial indications is that they are not going to be changing the rules to allow people who have been abroad to be entitled to that statutory sick pay. So it's unlikely that that will change. But of course, we know how this goes. It may change, and if it does, I promise you, you will be the first to know, and I will let you know if that changes. Now, depending on what the contractual position will be, whether they get sick pay or not, will be dependent on what your contractual terms are. So do go back and have a look at your terms of employment to see if there are any contractual rights to any such pay. As I said, it's unlikely because we are in unprecedented times. Nobody would have thought of having something like that in their contract, but if you do have it, then obviously you do need to rely on it because it is a contractual right. But employers may decide to make discretionary payments. They may decide that actually, I really need this individual into work, and make an exception to the rule, whether that is the exception to the rule on sick pay provisions, or whether it is an exception to the rule of paid time off. But do bear in mind that it may not always be appropriate in every circumstance to provide that extended discretionary pay, because it may well be, you've got a big organisation, and the financial impact of that might be quite substantial. Likewise, with a small company, it could be quite substantial. So again, it must be considered on how you as your organisation are going to deal with it. Whatever you decide you are going to do, you must make sure that you apply that fairly and consistently for every single individual. You can't pick and choose which individuals are going to get that discretionary additional pay or not. So, do bear in mind that, you need to be fair and reasonable throughout. If you make that decision, you need to apply it throughout. So another question that has sort of cropped up and what people are thinking about is, can employers stop employees from traveling abroad? Now, again, contracts of employment and holiday policies may have something in there where it prevents you from having, taking that holiday. You might need to seek permission, for an employee to cancel their holiday. So have a look at the contractual terms, because if there is a contractual term, you have to apply that contractual process. But if the contract is silent on whether an employer can cancel a holiday, an employer can do that as long as they provide notice. And that notice must be as long as the length of holiday that the individual is going to be taken. So for example, a week's notice will be required to cancel a week's leave. Now, the difficulty that we're having with that is that a lot of these government changes are taking place overnight. So if it is silent in the contract, you may not have that notice period to be able to serve notice on the employee that you are cancelling their holiday. Do bear in mind that if you are going to be cancelling their holiday, you have to bear the costs of cancelled holidays. Now, if this is not going to be covered by insurance, the employee's travel insurance, you will need to pick up that bill. So if you are going to be cancelling an employee's holiday, do think very carefully about what you will have to do to be able to do that, to make sure that you are kept on the right side of the law. It's unlikely that any of your policies and procedures will have anything in there to prohibit foreign travel, but there is something you may want to consider, particularly if it's voluntary. If somebody has to travel for work, it's your organisation that's putting them in that situation that they are in. So do follow your usual protocols in terms of if you're going to be introducing new policies. Make sure that if you are going to introduce a specific COVID-19 holiday cancellation policy, make sure that you share a draft version with your staff. Ask for them for their comments and their input. Of course, where relevant, if you have got a trade union or if you've got employee representatives, make sure that you consult them and try and get that consensual agreement before you force any change through. So, making sure that, you do put measures in place. Of course, if anybody then breaches those policies and procedures that are in place, you may be able to rely on a disciplinary proceeding to actually take it against the individual. So again, once you've introduced that policy, as long as it's shared, everybody is aware of the consequences, everybody knows what's going to happen. If an employee does deliberately breach that, you may be able to rely on the disciplinary procedure to take disciplinary action against that. But make sure that you communicate with staff so that they know well in advance what the expectations are from them. It is clear and it is well understood. Of course, it is a criminal offence for people leaving their home during quarantine, and employers must make sure that you don't put pressure on your employees that they have to return to work. So do find an alternative as to how you are going to deal with the rules on holidays, booking holidays, the quarantine implications and potential disciplinary action that may be taken. So again, we're in a changing world. As I said earlier on, it turns on a dime. Anybody who was in France or is going to France, of course, we know that from tomorrow that they need to self-isolate for 14 days after, changing that. There are, of course, risks in cancelling holidays and prohibiting overseas holidays with employees. and if you are going to introduce anything like that, make sure that you've got good, solid business reasons for doing so, because otherwise you may expose yourself to some potential claims. And it's always useful to have a written note, a written statement, giving a little bit of information as to the operational and financial impact of the organisation, particularly if there is an individual who is going to be part, who is going to cause a big impact on having that additional 2-week period away from, the organisation. Do also bear in mind, if you've got employees who are not of British nationals and they've travelled abroad to go and visit family, obviously, you need to bear in mind that forbidding foreign travel could potentially be indirect discrimination on the grounds of nationality. So again, always be mindful of discrimination when you are introducing new policies. So make sure that you're thinking ahead, get that top tip to take away, get a policy in place, share it with your employees so everybody knows exactly what's going to happen in the event that they do go on holiday and they find themselves having to self-isolate under quarantine when they come back. This isn't going to go away. So my top tip for you today is to think about it. If you want us to have a look at your policy or procedure that you're going to have in place, by all means, pop it over to us. We'll be more than happy to have a look at that for you. So that's furlough for now. So let's have a look at why you really joined us today, other than to listen to me on this gorgeous Friday afternoon. But let's have a look at what you will need to do when you are considering a business restructure. Do bear in mind that a business restructure is not necessarily a redundancy situation resulting in a redundancy. The two are separate, but on many occasions they do go hand in hand. So again, don't automatically think because you're going through a business restructure that there is going to be a redundancy, and don't automatically think that because of a redundancy there needs to be a business restructure. So there are two separate issues. And the two do need to be considered in their own rights with their own merits, but equally they also need to be considered alongside each other. So today I'm going to share with you some 10 steps to successfully manage an organisation restructure. And the first thing is, an organisation restructure does not happen overnight. And you need to make sure that you keep a cool and level head when you are going through it. Business change is inevitable. The good news is, of course, is change brings a lot of benefit, good benefit, and it spurs on the success of the business in the long run. But you also need to be aware of the common pitfalls that businesses quite often fall into when they haven't carefully thought out a proper plan of action to make sure that their transition is as smooth as possible. So again, it's not something that happens overnight. It takes time, effort, and a lot of work that goes into it. Whether you're about to go through a restructure or a redundancy, whether you're just simply curious of what the options are, we have our tried and tested 10-step guide to get you through an organisational restructure successfully. And it is a big job, but one that certainly has the positive benefits that comes out of it. So let's have a look at those 10 tips. So the first one is appoint a project leadership team. This needs to be led from a small group of people and filter it down. All major changes to an organisation will require a strong project leadership team. Now, you may want to select individuals. It might be the management team that are going to be doing it, but select people who are senior in your organisation, who are powerful in terms of their status. So you might have a manager who's really powerful in their status that you might want to have on board to help you going through the reorganisation. Make sure that you have people on your leadership team who have good reputation and who have the expertise to be able to guide you through this process. and make sure that the leadership team who are going to be managing this organisation change are given the time to be able to do it. You can't expect them to be doing a reorganisation of the business as well as doing their day-to-day job. It's simply not possible. You need to carve out some time for them to be able to focus purely and solely on the restructure. So find your A team who are going to, help you deliver the reorganization of your business. Make sure that, so that's tip number one. Tip two is make sure that you define and communicate the vision. Without a communication and without the vision, your project is going to fail. So the project team need to make sure that they clearly define the end goal. People want to know why we are going through what we're going through. What is it going to look like in the future? Don't be tempted to dive into the detailed planning without considering, the reasons behind the restructure. Targeting percentages for cost cuts may appear to speak for themselves, but they do not form a vision. They're just numbers. Make sure that you have that vision of what your organisation is going to look like once you have gone through that transition. Individuals need to be guided to your vision. You need to share with them what that's going to be, because a restructure may dissolve into something really confusing, something that's incompatible, and something that's time-consuming project if you don't share that vision. If people don't know what that end goal is, they are not going to know what we are working towards. Communicating your vision is absolutely key, and because it gives staff context for the change. It helps them to come to terms with that change. We all know that there is somebody in your organisation that doesn't like change. We all have them. People don't like change. We deal with a society that is so used to, their comforts. And when you're going through an organisation change, you are changing their comfort zone. So they may not be receptive to an organisation change if your vision is not shared to them or with them, and it's not communicated to them what that vision is going to look like. Communicate at every single step of the process. It is absolutely key, because in the absence of information, people will fill the vacuum with rumours, speculation, and that might end up having quite a negative impact on your organisation with a real positive drive that you want to take it going forward. So tip number 3 is, in terms of the communications, communicate the why as well as the what. People need to understand why the restructure is taking place, as well as the process that you are going to be following. Help individuals visualize the future. If your timeline is going to slip, because these things happen, the restructure gets hijacked by external forces that are beyond your control, various things come into play, but communicate it. Keep communicating that with your team. Keep communicating it with your staff, so they are kept well informed, so as they don't, in the absence of information, they will come to their own conclusions, which 9 times out of 10 is the incorrect conclusion. And as I say, people then tend to start thinking the worst. People then start thinking, I'm going to lose my job. They would rather jump ship rather than waiting to see what the outcome is. Even if there is bad news, it's better for you to be in control on how you're going to communicate that, rather than for people to come to their own, perhaps incorrect conclusions. So communicate the why as well as the what. So the fourth top tip is giving managers the support and skills to succeed. Now, when I talked about putting that leadership team in place, more often than not, it's not the managers that are dealing with that, but you need to arm your managers, give them the tools to be able to share the same message that you are, because communications happen through both verbal, written, verbal communication in words, as well as in deeds. It's the actions. Now, you might have this management team that may inadvertently undermine the message, the corporate message that's going out, by their own actions and their own behaviours, because they don't know. Managers who are facing uncertainties about their own futures will find it incredibly difficult to try and communicate and support their teams. I know I'm losing my job. How am I going to keep you enthusiastic and motivated when I'm thinking, you know, it's different for me? So make sure that you give your managers the support and the skills to be able to go through this process, not only because they will support you in your management change, but they will also support their team, as well as knowing themselves where this is going to be going. Supporting managers with brief notes, providing them with some coaching, some training, so they can reinforce that message. So it's the same message that's going out top level down, bottom level up, so everybody gets the same thing, same message. And make sure that, you know, transparency is so important to a healthy working place. You know, if you're open and honest and you're transparent with what you are doing, employees will engage with it. They will understand what is going on, and it will result in a much better, change in organisation structure. So the fifth point, the fifth step that you need to make sure that you do is consult and engage with your employees. So you're talking with your leadership team. They are busy putting all the, you know, processes and procedures in place. They're getting the communications out. You've got your managers who you are communicating with. But we're talking about your soldiers on the ground. Whether your organisation is unionised or not, you should always consult with your employees throughout the organisational restructure. There are legal obligations of collective and individual consultation depending on the size and scale of your proposed restructure. So again, you know, a genuine open consultation needs to be you know, shared with your employees. You need to engage with them because quite often genuine and open consultation leads to creative solutions, and it builds an atmosphere of trust and collaboration. If you can have that trust and getting your employees to join in to build what you want to build, to help you build, you will be in a far better position in getting that restructure through. You know, provide training, you know, make sure that everybody who's involved in it has the tools to support you, to get people on board, to, you know, help you forge that change with that organisational restructure. This will help individuals understand their roles in the organisation, improve their own communications within their teams, and it will just really increase that level of employee engagement. Employee engagement is so important in any organisation. Your employees are your biggest assets, and you really need to keep them engaged, motivated. They want to be there. They want to, you know, help you build your organisation, and it's making sure that you are there. You're giving them what they need to do that, and through that is consult and engage. Keep them in the loop. Looking at shaping the future of your organisation is looking at the culture, the future culture of your organisation. The culture of an organisation is shaped by those behaviours that are tolerated, celebrated and rewarded. Performance management, competencies, career progression and reward policies should all be part and parcel of developing that culture change, that culture that you want of your organisation. You know, by having that, you will make sure that those who you have in your team are inspired and aspired by what you want to create as an organisation. It will make a place, it will make a workplace where people want to be, rather than this is just a job. Many of us would have seen in the early days of lockdown, when we were going into furlough, so many business owners have talked to me about where they have seen true colours of their team, who is on board, who is there to help them, those who are prepared to muck in, roll up their sleeves, and those who ran for the hills. And quite often it was quite surprising, and it wasn't always the ones that they expected to be there to support them, and those that they thought, oh, they're just going to go off. They were the ones that stood behind them. So again, it's creating that culture of making people want to be there, rather than thinking, oh, I have to be there. So a restructure may result in moving people around. It may result in reducing the number of employees, but the organisation itself will not fundamentally change unless those behaviours of people within it change too. So a reorganisation is not just about moving people from doing one job to another, you know, perhaps in a different place, perhaps in a different location, but it fundamentally includes that culture change that needs to go with it, because if the culture doesn't change, it doesn't matter where people are going to be sitting, they will still be the same, and you need to change that. And you know, a restructure needs to be driven with those more focused areas. You know, customer focused, needs to be more responsive and more efficient. You need to give people a reason to behave differently, and the best way to do that, as I say, is through culture change, getting them to understand your vision, getting them to understand it. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It takes time, and you mustn't lose faith in thinking it's not happening quick enough. It takes time, and you need to give it the time, and you need to implement those changes. So you know, you must give people a reason why they want to come in and do that for you. So that leads me on to my point number 7, is tackling difficult decisions. In any organisation restructure, there will be obstacles that you will have to overcome to succeed. These will include internal politics. It may be around senior members of the team. It may be around long-serving employees, existing agreements that may be in place with regards to trade unions, expensive compensation precedents that have been set during previous restructures. And the leadership team needs to address those obstacles courageously, by having those difficult conversations, because if you don't do that, employees will become disillusioned and cynical, which will slow down the whole process. So have those difficult conversations up front. Make sure that people understand your vision, make sure they understand where you want to go, make sure that you've engaged them, that you've got the people that you want in your new organisation structure, because you want to make sure that the survivors of the restructure are engaged. You may need to re-engage them and motivate them before the new organisation structure can really start to be effective. Making sure that you keep the right people is so important. Focus on keeping the right people as much as cutting costs. Give careful consideration to selecting people who may stay in your organisation. Make sure that they've got that forward-thinking focus instead of focusing on the past. The past is done. We have changed so much over the last 4 to 6 months with the way we've had to do business, the way things have to be done, and the way people have shown their true colours. Make sure that we look forward. That's the only way you're going to be successful. Looking back is not going to make your business successful. Looking forward is what's going to get you to where you need to be. Use assessment centres, competency-based assessment interviews, or other validated tools to help you decide who is going to stay. Focus on who is going to stay rather than who is going to go. It's easy to focus on who you don't want, but the focus should be really on who you do want. Who do you want in your organisation? And do remember that how you treat people who are staying will be critical in getting the organisation back on track following a major restructure. So it's really important to make sure that you have that framework in place. Point number 9, and as I said, you know, this is a process that you go through. It is not something that happens overnight. It takes time. The physical restructuring and appointing people to new roles and possibly affecting some redundancies, this is just the beginning. You know, once this has been done, you know, you've used up a lot of energy in getting that. Sometimes it's quite draining, remaining positive all the time, but don't let your energy levels flag. Don't let the project slow down. Don't let it revert to business as usual. It's all too easy to go back to the way it was. And if you're going to do that, the restructure is almost going to be pointless, because what you want to make sure is that you are putting the restructure in place to have the positive effects going forward. So the restructure is not successful until it starts delivering the benefits which were prompted in the first place. It's going to take time. Do remember, when you start this, you want to get to a certain point and continue to focus on where you want to get to, where you want to get your business to in the future. And my last tip in terms of an organisation restructure is celebrate success when it happens. Restructures take place over a long period of time, so it's really important to celebrate those milestones as you go along. Make sure that, you know, if there are savings that have achieved, celebrate. If people have been successfully placed in their new jobs and roles, celebrate. All of these things will, you know, remind people of why we are doing the restructure and why the restructure was necessary in the first place. It's unlikely to happen on day one. In fact, I'm telling you, it won't happen on day one. It is going to take time, but one day, you know, everybody will realize that this is going to, you know, be to their benefit. It's unlikely that people will wake up one day in office and realize, oh, the restructure is complete, it's done and dusted. That won't happen. It's a journey that you're going to go on. So make sure that you seize those opportunities to celebrate when they come along. Don't wait until the end, because you'll be waiting a very long time. So remember, if the vision and the goals are clearly identified, you are much more likely to achieve them. With clarity and dedication, the new restructure will be up and running more quickly, and you'll be making those cost savings much quicker. You'll be improving efficiencies, and you'll be delivering a better service and making sure you have retained the right people for the future of your organisation. And all in all, you'll be left with a much happier and healthier and promising business, and that's what we all really need to be focusing on. We've had a torrid time over the last few months, you know, in terms of, you know, grappling with the impact of COVID-19, but now is your opportunity to make sure that you have got your business ready, set to go forward. So that's looking at, I've given you those top 10 tips. I will you know, remind you of those when we send out the communications that come out after our webinars. But let's just have a look at what is the difference between a restructure and a redundancy. Sometimes an employer may need to dismiss staff because of a business restructure. But if the restructure hasn't led to a need to reduce headcount, it may not necessarily be a redundancy. A redundancy is a very specific and defined term, and it may not necessarily be a result of you know, people losing their job as a result of a restructure may not necessarily be a redundancy. As I say, a redundancy has a very specific and defined meaning. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if there is a restructure, there is going to be a redundancy. And the important part is you do need to, you know, if you are going to be dismissing someone as a result of a restructure, you've got to make sure that there is a potentially fair reason for their dismissal. And we've talked about this before in making sure that you hang your hat on one of the 5 potentially fair reasons for a dismissal. And in a restructure situation, there are actually only 2 options. It may be a redundancy, providing it satisfies that legal test, or the dismissal will be for some other substantial reason. The difference is of course, statutory redundancy pay is only paid if there is a redundancy situation. If the dismissal is as a result of some other substantial reason, the employee is not entitled to the statutory redundancy pay. Many employers do actually choose to pay the statutory redundancy element of it because they feel that there is a moral duty to do so. But there is not an obligation to do that if the dismissal is not because of a redundancy. If it is because of some other substantial reason, it is on notice, and some other substantial reason is because of the restructure that has taken place. Quite often the word redundancy is used without the full understanding of what it means, and it's really important to understand what a redundancy means. I mean, a redundancy is an employer can only dismiss on the grounds of redundancy if there is a genuine redundancy situation. So as I mentioned, the redundancy is a defined term. It's a legal definition in the Employment Rights Act, and that is defined in section 139. And really what it means is that a redundancy situation exists if an employer has stopped carrying out work in the part of the business where an employee was employed, or they are closing down a particular location, or the head count is reduced because there is no longer a need for the number of staff that there are. So quite often, you know, those three are quite specific to your each individual. So there may be no longer a requirement for your employees to do work of a particular kind. So you may not be doing, you know, some particular work because you've had to change the way you do things and you now do it differently. That will be a reduction of work of a particular kind. Of course, where the place is closing down, you might have a number of locations and you might be closing one of the branches, one of the locations. That is a place closure. That would also give rise to a redundancy situation. And of course, you know, where you are no longer providing, you know, a type of business, a type of work where the individual is employed. Now, for the dismissal to fall into that, you have to make sure that you follow a fair and reasonable redundancy process. Again, redundancy is separate and different to a restructure. The two may run side by side or parallel to each other, but it does not mean that if you're going through a restructure that the redundancy automatically follows. So, you know, making sure that you do, you know, follow a fair procedure when you are doing that. And it's really important that when you are dismissing someone and you're hanging your hat on that potentially fair reason, that you make sure that it is the real reason, the principal reason on why you are going to be terminating that individual's employment. And also, again, when you are looking at the definitions of a redundancy, it doesn't have to already have happened. It may be anticipated that that is going to happen. It may be that you anticipate a reduction of work of a particular kind. It may be that you anticipate that you are going to close a certain branch. So again, it doesn't have to already have happened or is happening. It may be that you're anticipating it in the future. It is intended to happen in the future. So that is really sort of looking at the redundancy. Redundancy is a journey. I've talked about redundancies before, but making sure that you know, you don't expose yourself you know, when you have gone through that particular process, because of course employees often challenge the fairness of a redundancy. It's not whether it is a redundancy situation is very rarely challenged. It's the process and the fairness of how that is done, whether you know, it has been a fair process. And again, you know, making sure that you don't automatically unfair dismiss an employee when you are going through the redundancy process. To make sure you use a fair selection criteria, you have a fair selection pool, and you go through that process. I'm not going to talk too much more about that because, of course, you know, we've done it before. We do have our redundancy webinars, so, you know, again, do make sure that you equip yourself with that. And, you know, if you are thinking of, you know, carrying out a redundancy or a restructure, far too often I hear from people and I see organizations searching Google, and we search a Google process and we think we can do it. But all too often people get it wrong. Yes, there is the Google resource out there. We love Google. Everybody loves Google. You can Google anything and it can tell you an answer. But knowing that you're doing it correctly, you know, is making sure that you get it right. And I know costs are tight at the moment, but the process, the fairness and the reasonableness is what counts. And if you get that wrong, it does give rise to an unfair dismissal claim. And, you know, it can cost you reputational damage if you get it wrong. My team and I can help you. You know, we have cost-effective solutions. So, you know, do get in contact, do get in touch. so we can help you with that webinar. And some really good news is we have recently found out that the government has a scheme, and I'm looking around on my desk here because I thought I brought the information with me, but there is a government scheme, and I'm going to send out the link to you at the end of this webinar, where you can get a grant. It is a small grant for businesses who are looking to through various sort of things. It helps with technology. The grant is a maximum of, I think, up to £5,000. But if you are looking for a restructure, or you're having to go through a redundancy and you don't have the money to do it, have a look for that grant, because one of the specific things that they are earmarking this grant for is for specialist HR help and support. So, as I say, I will send out that link with the information to you about that grant. It's a little grant. It's the LEP Growth Hubs that is providing the grant. But as I said, I will send that information out. So I know it costs money, but it will cost you more if you get it wrong. Now that we know that there's a little bit of funding available, do get in contact with them. See if you can get some of that funding to help you with that specialist HR support you're going to need if you are considering a restructure or if you are considering a redundancy. So again, financial help is there. We are here to help you. HR for UK are here to help you. We want to go through that journey with you, making sure that you get it right and keeping you on the right side of the law. We do have our paid for webinar. Our next paid for webinar is next week, the 19th of August. So if you are looking and you're thinking, well, actually, I think I want to go on that, do get in contact with us, and we will be more than happy to send you some further information on that. We do, of course, have our business crisis packages. Now, that may be whatever you are going through, whether it's a restructure, a redundancy, whether you're going through a variation of terms, whether you are going through a disciplinary, whatever the case may be, we do have our specialist support. We will be able to help you with our crisis package. As I say, it may well be going through a particularly difficult disciplinary, particularly difficult grievance. We are here. Please know that we are here to help you. We get in there. We are there. We are your business partner. We get under the hood to help you to get to the solution that you need to make sure that your business can successfully survive going forward, regardless of what the crisis may be. Originally, it was the coronavirus crisis, but as we are moving out of this, businesses in various times are facing challenges where they may need that additional help and support. So that's it from me today. I've been seeing those awesome questions coming in. I am going to have a look at those. Oh, and I found my piece of paper. So I am going to send it to you. I was looking in the wrong place, but I will be putting out, the 20 million in new grants to boost the recovery for small businesses. As I say, it is a grant for businesses in England that can access it between £1,000 and £5,000 for new equipment and specialist advice. Particularly, they are also referring to HR help and support. So I will make sure I get that out to you. So just a very quick reminder, we will be back here in 2 weeks' time. We are now going into a 2-week cycle on our webinars. Next webinar will be on the 28th of August. I'm looking over the week just to make sure I get the date right. It'll be the 28th of August, and I'm going to be talking to you about variation of terms. So many organizations may not have gone through the restructure, redundancy, but maybe you're looking at changing the terms of employment with your employees. Maybe you are looking at putting them at working part-time from home, part-time from work. It will be a variation of term. You may be thinking we're going to be reducing their hours that they're going to be working, so that is a variation of term. You may be requiring them to work more hours but on the same level of pay. That is going to be a variation of terms. So I'm going to talk to you about variation of terms, how you can use it to make your business more successful, how you can use it in your particular circumstances, and all important, making sure we keep you on the right side of the law by guiding you through that process. So without any further ado, I'm going to have a look at these lovely questions. Cecilia, lovely. Do you have to offer all staff the opportunity to take jobs available in a restructure. So the question there is, you'll have a look at the restructure first, and it will depend on, you know, whether you're going to have a look at department by department, because what you are going to be having a look at, now I'm looking at a big organisation here, is you wouldn't necessarily be wanting, and I don't mean to undermine any role here, and that's not my intention. What you want to try and manage is that you're not having, for example, if you have a fleet of drivers applying for jobs that are outside of their skill set. So when you are looking at offering jobs and opportunities of jobs, when you are in a restructure, you know, make sure that they do have the skill set. But more importantly, make sure you have as a starting point the people that you want in your organization as part of that restructure. Don't forget, looking at an organization chart when you are looking at a restructure and looking at when you're carrying out a redundancy, you are looking at two different things. So do bear in mind when you are looking at that, you are applying different things. So with a restructure, you don't have to offer all the staff the opportunity to take those jobs, because it may well be that actually that individual is not the individual for your business, but making sure you have the right people to be able to take you forward on that. So I hope that answers your question. So I want to try something. Bear with me one moment. I'm just going to try and make this question box a little bit bigger before I get on to Zelika's question. So lovely. We have a question here from Zelika. Would HR for UK recommend settlement agreements for employers, as it is relatively easy to get the redundancy process wrong and expose your business at an increased risk at employment tribunals? Absolutely. Now, settlement agreements are usually used when solicitors have got involved. At an early stage, you can certainly use ACAS by entering into what we call a COT3 agreement, which is very similar. It has similar terms as to what a settlement agreement has. But of course, the settlement agreement is going to cost you money because you're going to have to make a contribution to legal fees, whereas using ACAS under a COT3, under an employer-led agreement, it doesn't cost you anything. But do remember that if you are going to be going down a COT3 agreement or a settlement agreement, you do have to have a reason for going into those conversations. So it needs to be one of those potentially 5 reasons for a dispute. So those are the 5 reasons for a potentially fair reason for dismissal. So again, if you are going through a redundancy, absolutely, that's the best way you can give your organisation the cast iron security, because once an employee has entered into that COT3 agreement or settlement agreement, they waive their right to bring an employment tribunal claim against the company. So certainly we do recommend it, and we certainly do advise a lot of our clients in going through that process, because, you know, we are going to be facing difficult times. There are going to be employees who are going to try and have a second bite of the cherry. So even if you've had the perfect process, you know, it's not going to prevent an employee from taking you to tribunal if they've got more than 2 years. So very good question, Zelika. Thank you for asking. So Stephanie has been asking another question. Will we be getting a copy of this webinar? Of course you are. These webinars are all recorded. You will get a link to the recording afterwards, and you will also get a copy of these Q&As, you know, the full answers that will come out to you. So yes, Stephanie, you won't miss out on anything. So we've got a question here from Naya. Apologies if I've incorrectly pronounced your surname, so apologies. So if someone is stuck abroad, we don't pay them SSP. Absolutely. SSP is only if they are showing symptoms or have the virus itself, or they've been advised to self-isolate because of the test and trace system. That's the only time that they will be required get SSP. If they're stuck abroad, it will be either unpaid or it will have to be taking it as extended additional holiday if they've got the sufficient accrued but not yet taken holiday. But yes, if they're stuck abroad, it's going to be very difficult. But making sure that employees are aware of that. So if they are going on holiday, and you know, the likelihood of them going to a country which may end up being on the red list where you have to quarantine on the return, make sure that employees are aware of that. And you hear of it quite often where people have caught their holiday short. I think there are hundreds of thousands of people scrambling to get out of France as we speak to try and get people back in so they don't fall into that quarantine, because it will be unpaid. It will definitely not be SSP, so definitely not. Stephanie has asked another question here. Would it be worth having a pandemic policy to refer to? Absolutely. Now, pandemic policy can refer to a number of things. So having it to incorporate all of that is really a good idea. So yes, definitely something that we would recommend, definitely something that we would advise on in getting a pandemic policy, so that you can deal with it in a fair and reasonable manner. So again, people are aware of what that policy contains. If you are going to be writing a pandemic policy, you want to have a look and think of all the areas on how you want to do pull that together. Of course, you need to consider that this pandemic is dealing with the particulars of this particular pandemic. Who knows when the next pandemic is going to be? It might be slightly different, but of course you can always vary a policy once it's been there by you know, consulting that change. So very good idea, Stephanie, very good idea in having a pandemic policy containing all of that. Anil has asked 2 questions. So the first question is, an employee was on holiday in India at the time of lockdown in India and has not been able to travel back since. What are his entitlements? So again, you know, it's absence from the organisation. So in the first instance, I would have he would have used some of his holiday when he was going out there. The rest of it, you perhaps may want to attribute any subsequently accrued but not yet taken holiday, so he gets some pay, but unfortunately it will be unpaid leave, because you know, it's not, there is no more holiday. It's not leave for a dependent, so it's not any of the other statutory entitlements, so it will be, I'm afraid, unpaid leave. So your second question, Anil, is I have to apologize, Anil. I've just accidentally deleted your second question, but I think it was actually a thank you. But if you want to resubmit it, I will relook at it. I do apologize. I had clicky fingers there and clicked the deleted button to move up so I can get these other up. So Anil, apologies. Andrea has asked a question. Please, would you send a copy of the webinar, as I was interrupted and missed some of it? Many thanks. Of course, that's no problem at all, Andrea. We will make sure that everybody who has registered for this webinar and who has sat on it and listened to me, you will get a copy of it. So that's absolutely brilliant. So the last question I have here, Kim, what are the potentially fair reasons for dismissal? Very good question. So there's 5 potentially fair reasons for dismissal. The first reason is conduct. Now, conduct will include gross misconduct, but it's still under the umbrella of conduct. Redundancy is the second reason for a potentially fair reason for dismissal. The third one, and these are in no particular order, I'm racking my brain here. The third one is capability. Capability is also, will deal with poor performance capability, and it will also deal with ill health capability. So like conduct, it's split into capability is also split in two. The fourth reason for a potentially fair reason is if there is a statutory breach. So, for example, if someone loses their driving license, it would be unlawful for them to continue driving, particularly if their job is as a driver. So it would be if there is a statutory breach, then that is the fourth potentially fair reason for a dismissal. And the final potentially fair reason for a dismissal is for some other substantial reason, which is almost a catch-all for anything else that doesn't fit into those four categories, but the reason must be substantial and you must be able to justify the justification for terminating someone's employment on those grounds. So, Kim, that was the last question. I have managed to keep everybody engaged. We're 10 past 4. I always go over my time allocation, so I do apologise. But thank you very much for giving up your time on a Friday afternoon to listen to me. I do hope that you have found the information that I have shared with you today helpful. I do hope that you will be able to take it away and give it some thought and think about how you can incorporate what I have said in your organisation. As I said, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you how you heard about our webinar. I'd love to hear from you how we can help you. And I'd also love to hear from you what you would like to hear from me in the weeks going forward. Because some of the feedback that we've had is that we'd like to know what the topics are going to be going forward. So I'd like to try and prepare as much as I can, but I will always remain on topic and I will always spend the first 10-15 minutes on whatever is going on at the time, so you won't miss out on anything that is topical, even if we are going to be doing something else. So thank you very much, everybody. Have an amazing Friday afternoon. Don't forget, you can get in contact with us through our website, www.hrforuk.com. You can drop us an email at info@hrforuk.com, or you can give us a call on 01455 444 and I look forward to speaking to you all. Have an amazing weekend, have a brilliant week next week, and I look forward to seeing you all back here on the 28th of August, where I will talk you through going through the variation of terms. Thank you very much. Bye for now.